The Great Hall of Nexus Prime buzzed with excitement. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for the most important meeting of the year. Today, every species would show their military power to the Galactic Trade Council. The strongest fleets would earn the best trading rights and protection deals. Hyunwoo straightened his simple black suit as he watched the other ambassadors prepare their presentations. The human diplomat looked ordinary compared to the aliens around him. The Vorthak representatives wore golden armor that gleamed under the station's lights. Their bodies stood 3 meters tall with 4 arms and skin like polished stone. The Crystalline Collective's ambassador looked like a walking mountain of blue gems. Even the smallest alien species towered over the humans. "Look at them," Da-un whispered to Hyunwoo. She wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's military, but it seemed plain next to the elaborate costumes around them. "They think we don't belong here." Admiral Craxton of the Vorthak Empire took the stage first. His booming voice filled the hall as holograms appeared above the crowd. Massive ships materialized in the air, dreadnoughts the size of small moons. Each one bristled with weapons that could crack planets. The display showed 50,000 of these giants arranged in perfect formations. "Behold the might of Vorthak," Craxton roared. "Our fleet has conquered 17 star systems this year alone. Who dares challenge our supremacy?" The crowd erupted in impressed murmurs. Even the other powerful species nodded with respect. The Vorthak fleet was truly magnificent. Next came the Crystalline Collective. Their living ships grew from tiny seeds into massive organisms that pulsed with internal light. These bioships could repair themselves and adapt to any environment. The largest ones were bigger than entire space stations. They showed recordings of their fleet consuming asteroids and growing even larger. Species after species presented their forces. The Nexari displayed reality-bending ships that could fold space itself. The Thurian hegemony showed swarms of mechanical fighters that moved like schools of metal fish. Each presentation was more impressive than the last. Finally, Hyunwoo's turn arrived. The human ambassador walked to the center of the stage with calm steps. He pressed a button on his small device. Above the crowd, a hologram appeared. 12 ships. The hall fell silent for a moment. Then the laughter began. The human vessels were sleek and small. Each ship looked like it could fit inside a single hangar bay of a Vorthak dreadnought. They had smooth hulls with no visible weapons, no spikes or armor plating, no glowing energy cores. They looked almost fragile. "Is this a joke?" Admiral Craxton's voice boomed across the hall. 12 toys? My flagship's shuttle bay could hold your entire fleet." The Crystalline ambassador's voice sounded like grinding glass. How did such a weak species even develop space travel? "Did someone give you the technology?" More laughter rippled through the crowd. The Nexari representative waved a tentacled appendage dismissively. "Perhaps they are showing us their cargo ships by mistake." Hyunwoo stood quietly in the center of the mockery. His face showed no anger or embarrassment. Da-Yun remained at attention beside him, her expression blank as the aliens continued their jokes. 12 ships, laughed a Thurian delegate. "My personal escort has more vessels than humanity's entire navy." The Vorthak admiral stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the human diplomat. "Ambassador Hyunwoo, surely you have more ships hidden somewhere. This cannot be your true military strength." "This is our current deployment," Hyunwoo replied simply. His voice was calm and even. 12 ships, as shown. The laughter grew louder. Several species began talking among themselves, no longer paying attention to the humans. The Nexari ambassador spoke to his colleagues in their clicking language, occasionally pointing at the tiny hologram still floating above the stage. "I propose," the Nexari said, switching back to galactic standard language, "that humanity be excluded from the Mutual Defense Pact." What could 12 tiny vessels contribute to galactic security? Murmurs of agreement swept through the hall. The Crystalline representative added, "Perhaps they should be classified as a protectorate instead of an independent civilization. Clearly they need our protection more than they can offer theirs." Da-Yun's jaw tightened slightly, but she said nothing. Hyunwoo simply nodded politely. "We understand your position," the human ambassador said. "We will accept whatever classification the council deems appropriate." This response surprised some of the aliens. They expected humans to argue or plead for better treatment. Instead, Hyunwoo seemed almost relieved by their decision. The meeting continued with discussions of trade routes and territorial boundaries. Humanity was assigned to the lowest tier of galactic citizenship. They would pay higher taxes for using galactic trade lanes. Their merchants would need permits for most systems. Human colonies would receive no military protection from the Council. Through it all, Hyunwoo and Da-eun sat quietly. They took notes and asked polite questions about the new regulations. They showed no signs of frustration or anger. As the meeting ended, Admiral Craxton approached the human delegation. His forearms crossed over his massive chest. "Your species shows wisdom in accepting your limitations," he said in what he probably thought was a kind tone. "The galaxy can be dangerous for those who overestimate their abilities." "We appreciate your concern," Hyunwoo replied. "Humanity prefers to avoid unnecessary conflicts." The Admiral nodded approvingly. "Good. Stay in your small corner of space and you will be safe. Leave the real work to species with proper fleets." As the Vorthak delegation walked away, Da-eun whispered to her ambassador, "That was harder than expected." Hyunwoo's expression remained neutral. "Phase 1 complete. They believe exactly what we wanted them to believe." "The restraint protocols are working perfectly," Da-eun agreed quietly. "They see weakness where they should see wisdom." The two humans gathered their materials and prepared to leave Nexus Prime. Around them, the great powers of the galaxy made plans for trade and conquest. None of them paid any attention to the species with the tiny fleet. They had no idea what they had just done. In the depths of space, in a system the galactic maps listed as unexplored, 12 small ships received a coded transmission. The message was simple: assessment complete. Maintain current posture. Phase 2 on standby. The ships acknowledged the signal and continued their patrol routes. To any observer, they looked like a pathetic attempt at a space navy. In reality, they were something far more terrifying. They were humanity's way of saying we come in peace while keeping their true capabilities hidden in the dark between the stars. 3 months had passed since the meeting at Nexus Prime. The galaxy continued its normal business of trade, politics, and small conflicts between neighboring systems. The great powers maintained their territories while smaller species struggled to survive in the spaces between empires. On the monitoring station at the galaxy's edge, Nexari technician Vel 7 noticed something strange on the long-range sensors. The readings showed massive energy signatures moving through the dimensional barriers that protected their reality from the void beyond. "Supervisor," Vel 7 called across the quiet control room. "I'm detecting unusual activity at coordinates 77 Mark 12. Supervisor Quint 9 floated over to examine the readings. Her crystalline body flickered with concern as she processed the data. "Run a full spectrum analysis. These energy patterns are not in our databases." The results came back within minutes. What they showed made Quint 9's internal light dim with fear. The dimensional barriers were breaking down. Something was coming through from the space between realities. The first scouts emerged 12 hours later. They called themselves the Devourers, though they had no spoken language. They were machines but not built by any known species. Each one was the size of a capital ship, with surfaces that seemed to absorb all light. They moved with purpose through space, heading directly for the nearest star system. The border world of Keth 7 was their first target. The planet's defense grid activated as the strange ships approached. Automated messages demanded identification and purpose. The Devourers gave no response. Instead, they began to feed. The mechanical swarm descended on the planet like hungry insects. They broke apart the surface, consuming metal and organic matter alike. Everything they touched was converted into more Devourers. The process was horrifyingly efficient. Within 6 hours, Keth 7 was gone. In its place was an expanding cloud of new mechanical hunters, each one identical to the originals. The swarm had doubled in size. Emergency signals flashed across the galaxy. The Galactic Defense Network activated for the first time in 3 centuries. Every major power received the same message. Unknown hostiles were consuming entire worlds and growing stronger with each attack. Admiral Craxton received the alert on his flagship while patrolling Vorthak space. His forearms moved quickly across the command console as he reviewed the battle recordings from Keth 7. "Impossible," he muttered. "Nothing can consume a planet that quickly." His communications officer approached nervously. "Sir, we're receiving mobilization orders from High Command. All fleets are to converge on the invasion zone." Craxton nodded grimly. "Send word to the other species. We must coordinate our response." Across the galaxy, the great fleets began to move. The Vorthak Empire deployed 100,000 dreadnoughts. The crystalline collective sent their world ships massive living vessels that could grow new weapons during battle. The Nexari unleashed their reality-bending technology, ships that could fold space and time around their enemies. In the middle of this massive mobilization, a small signal arrived at Galactic Command. It was from Earth. Human fleet requesting deployment coordinates, came the polite message from Admiral Tae-hyun. All 12 vessels ready for immediate departure. The Galactic Command officer who received the message almost deleted it. 12 tiny ships would be useless in a battle of this scale, but protocol demanded a response. Human fleet assigned to civilian evacuation, Sector 7G, came the reply. Maintain safe distance from combat zones. It was a polite way of keeping humanity out of the real fighting. No one wanted to waste resources protecting such a weak ally. The first major battle took place in the Helix Nebula. 50,000 Allied ships faced off against the Devourer Vanguard. The mechanical swarm had grown to several thousand units by consuming 3 more star systems. The battle began with the traditional tactics that had served the galaxy for millennia. The Vorthak dreadnoughts opened with their planet-cracking cannons. The crystalline bioships launched living missiles that could adapt to enemy defenses. The Nexari warped reality around the Devourers, trying to trap them in folded space. For the first hour, it seemed like the Allied forces were winning. Dozens of Devourers were destroyed, their dark hulls cracking under the massive firepower. Then the enemy adapted. The remaining Devourers studied the wreckage of their fallen units. Within minutes, they had developed new armor that resisted the Vorthak weapons. Their hulls began to reflect the crystalline biomissiles back at their targets. They found ways to escape the Nexari reality traps. Worse, every destroyed Devourer was immediately harvested by the survivors. The enemy was learning from each loss and growing stronger. What had started as an advantage for the Allied forces quickly became a nightmare. Admiral Craxton watched in horror as his mighty dreadnoughts were systematically destroyed. The enemy had adapted to every weapon, every tactic. His ships were being consumed and converted into more Devourers. All units retreat, he ordered. Fall back to defensive positions. The great fleets of the galaxy limped away from their first encounter with the Devourers. They had lost nearly half their forces while the enemy had grown stronger. The mechanical swarm continued its advance, consuming everything in its path. Emergency sessions were called on every homeworld. Military leaders struggled to understand how to fight an enemy that learned from every attack. The Devourers were not just consuming matter, they were consuming knowledge and turning it against their creators. In the chaos of retreat and reorganization, a small message arrived at Galactic Command. Admiral Tae-hyun's polite voice requested permission to engage the Devourer advanced scouts. Request denied, came the immediate response. Human fleet to maintain evacuation duties only. The communications officer at Galactic Command shook his head as he sent the message. 12 tiny ships would be destroyed instantly if they encountered even a single Devourer. At least by keeping them in the rear, some humans would survive to tell their species what had happened. On the bridge of his small flagship, Admiral Tae-hyun received the denial with calm acceptance. He turned to his communications officer, a woman named Soo-jin, whose fingers moved quickly across her control panel. Signal received and understood, Tae-hyun said quietly. Begin Phase 2 preparations. Soo-jin nodded and began sending coded messages to the other 11 ships in the human fleet. The signals were brief and used encryption that would look like simple navigation data to any observer. The real message was far more significant. Assessment complete. Threat confirmed. Deploy countermeasures. Across the galaxy, the great powers prepared for what they believed would be their final stand against the Devourers. They had no idea that the species they had mocked was about to change everything. The 12 small ships that had been dismissed as toys began to move toward the battle zone. To any observer, they still looked like a pathetic attempt at a fleet. They were about to discover how wrong that assumption was. The remnants of the galactic fleets gathered at Rally Point Delta, a fortified station in the inner systems. What had once been the proudest armadas in known space now limped home with massive casualties. Admiral Craxton's Vorthak dreadnoughts were reduced to fewer than 30,000 ships. The crystalline collective had lost half their bio-vessels. Even the mighty Nexari reality benders had been forced to retreat. In the command center of Rally Point Delta, military leaders from across the galaxy studied the tactical displays with growing despair. The Devourers had consumed 12 star systems in just 2 weeks. Every battle had made them stronger and smarter. They adapted to every weapon, learned from every tactic. We estimate they now number over 50,000 units, reported General Thax of the Thurian hegemony. His metallic voice carried notes of defeat. Each one is equivalent to our best battleships. They're approaching the core systems. Admiral Craxton slammed one of his 4 fists on the planning table. There must be a way to stop them. Our combined firepower should be enough to break through their adaptations. No, said the crystalline representative, her voice like breaking glass. Each attack only teaches them new defenses. We're making them stronger with every engagement. In the corner of the room, Admiral Tae-hyun sat quietly with his aide, Da-eun. The 2 humans had been largely ignored since their arrival. Their 12 ships were considered irrelevant to the planning. Tae-hyun cleared his throat politely. Excuse me, but may I request permission to engage the Devourer Vanguard? My ships are ready for combat. The room fell silent. Then Admiral Craxton let out a bitter laugh. Admiral, with all respect to your courage, 12 ships cannot accomplish what our 100,000 could not. You would be throwing away your lives for nothing. The Nixari commander's tentacles waved dismissively. Keep your vessels in the rear lines, human. When we fall, perhaps you can evacuate some civilians. Tae-hyun nodded calmly. I understand your position. However, I believe there may be some misunderstanding about our capabilities. What misunderstanding? General Thax asked. Your ships are tiny. We've all seen them. Da-eun stepped forward and activated her portable display unit. Above the table, a new hologram appeared. It showed the same 12 human ships, but now they were moving in formation toward a cluster of asteroids. What you saw at Nexus Prime were our diplomatic vessels, she explained in a steady voice. These are our seed ships. The aliens watched as the 12 ships approached the asteroid field. Suddenly, each vessel began to change. Hull plates shifted and separated. Internal structures unfolded like metal flowers blooming in space. Within minutes, what had been small ships were now massive industrial complexes, each one the size of a moon. Impossible, whispered the crystalline representative. Matter cannot be compressed to that degree. But the display continued. The 12 platforms had positioned themselves throughout the asteroid field and begun to work. Swarms of smaller craft emerged from their structures, breaking down the space rocks at the molecular level. Raw materials flowed into the platforms like streams of liquid metal. Then the real show began. New ships started emerging from the industrial complexes. Not the lumbering giants that other species built, but sleek, fast vessels that moved with predatory grace. Each one was about the size of a Vorthak frigate, but they appeared in vast numbers. Jiho, the chief engineer aboard Tae-hyun's flagship, spoke for the first time. Manufacturing efficiency is currently at 67%. We should reach optimal production in approximately 4 hours. Production? Admiral Craxton stammered. You're building ships in real time? Not just ships, Tae-hyun replied calmly. A fleet. Each platform can produce 500 combat units per hour. We currently have 12 platforms operational. The math was simple, but the implications were staggering. In 4 hours, humanity would have 24,000 warships. In 8 hours, they would have nearly 50,000. The production would continue as long as there were raw materials to harvest. But that wasn't the most shocking revelation. Each vessel is controlled by an artificial intelligence, Sujin explained, her fingers dancing across her control pad. They can make tactical decisions faster than organic minds can process information. They learn and adapt in real time. Da-eun manipulated the display to show a detailed view of one of the new ships. Its hull was smooth and featureless, but as they watched, weapon ports opened and closed in different configurations. The ships can reconfigure themselves during battle, she continued. If a weapon proves ineffective, they can manufacture new ones within minutes. If armor is penetrated, they can repair and strengthen it automatically. The alien commanders stared at the display in growing horror. This wasn't just advanced technology. It was warfare reduced to industrial production. How long have you been hiding this capability? The Nixari commander asked, his voice barely a whisper. We weren't hiding it, Tae-hyun replied honestly. We simply saw no reason to reveal it. The galaxy seemed peaceful. Our diplomatic fleet was sufficient for normal interactions. Admiral Craxton's massive frame trembled with a mixture of awe and fear. You could have conquered us all, your industrial capacity alone. Why would we want to conquer anyone? Tae-hyun asked, seeming genuinely puzzled. Conquest is inefficient. Trade and cooperation produce better results with fewer resources. The human admiral gestured to his aide, and the display changed again. Now it showed the tactical situation at the galactic rim, where the Devourers continued their advance. However, the current situation requires a different approach, Tae-hyun said, his voice taking on a harder edge. The Devourers cannot be reasoned with or traded with. They can only be stopped. Sujin began transmitting new orders to the human platforms. All units initiate combat production protocols. Target, Devourer Advance Fleet. Authorization, full deployment. The alien commanders watched in stunned silence as the 12 platforms shifted into maximum production mode. The stream of new ships increased dramatically. The vessels moved with perfect coordination, forming into attack formations that flowed like schools of deadly fish. We estimate contact with the enemy in 6 hours, Jiho reported. Current fleet strength, 18,000 units, and increasing. General Thax found his voice first. What do you need from us? Tae-hyun turned to face the assembled alien leaders. For the first time since they had known him, the polite diplomat was gone. In his place stood someone who radiated quiet confidence and controlled power. Stay out of our way, he said simply. The Devourers adapt to conventional tactics because they understand conventional warfare. They do not understand industrial warfare. Da-un brought up new displays showing predicted engagement scenarios. The human ships would not fight like a traditional fleet. Instead, they would swarm the enemy like antibodies attacking an infection. We don't destroy our enemies, she explained. We make them irrelevant. As the alien commanders struggled to process what they were seeing, the first human combat units reached the edge of Devourer-controlled space. The real battle was about to begin. But first, the galaxy would learn what it meant to face humanity when the diplomatic options were exhausted. The first engagement between humanity's swarm and the Devourers took place in the ruins of the Keth system, where the mechanical invaders had consumed 3 planets. Captain Minho commanded the lead squadron of 200 human vessels as they dropped out of hyperspace directly into the enemy formation. The Devourers reacted exactly as their programming dictated. They had faced the conventional fleets of the galaxy and learned to counter their tactics. They expected large ships with heavy armor and massive weapons. They prepared to adapt to whatever new threat these smaller vessels might present. They were completely unprepared for what actually happened. The human ships didn't behave like a fleet at all. They moved like a living organism, individual units flowing around obstacles and enemies with perfect coordination. Each ship was connected to every other ship through quantum communication links, sharing information faster than thought itself. When the Devourers fired their first salvo, expecting to destroy dozens of the smaller vessels, the human ships simply weren't there anymore. They had scattered in seemingly random directions, only to regroup behind the enemy formation within seconds. Minho's ship led the counterattack. Instead of firing massive energy beams like the other galactic species, the human vessels launched clouds of microscopic machines. These nanobots swarmed over the Devourer hulls, not trying to destroy them but to study them. Analysis complete, reported the AI controlling Minho's vessel. Enemy hull composition identified. Weaknesses cataloged, transmitting data to all units. Within minutes, every human ship in the battle zone had updated its weapons to exploit the specific vulnerabilities of Devourer armor. But this was only the beginning of humanity's tactical advantage. When the Devourers destroyed their first human ship, they expected to harvest the wreckage and learn from it. Instead, they found themselves facing something they had never encountered, an enemy that treated its own losses as weapons. The destroyed human vessel had been programmed to self-destruct in a very specific way. Its reactor core released a burst of exotic particles that interfered with the Devourer's quantum processors. For a few crucial seconds, the mechanical minds were blind and confused. In those seconds, dozens of human ships swarmed the disoriented devourers, but they didn't try to destroy them completely. Instead, they injected new nanobots that began rewriting the enemy programming from within. Captain Yoon Ah, commanding the second wave of human ships, watched as captured devourers turned their weapons on their former allies. Conversion successful on Units 7 through 15, she reported. They're now operating under our control. This was warfare as the galaxy had never seen it. The humans weren't destroying their enemies. They were recruiting them. The devourers tried to adapt as they had done against every other species. They developed new defenses against the nanobots. They learned to destroy their own units if they showed signs of conversion. They even began to change their quantum frequencies to resist human interference. But for every adaptation the devourers made, the humans evolved 3 countermeasures. The AI minds controlling the human vessels could process millions of tactical variations in the time it took organic minds to form a single thought. More importantly, the human ships could rebuild themselves during battle. When a devourer developed armor that resisted human weapons, the nearby human vessels would pause their attack for 30 seconds while they reconfigured their hull structures. New weapons would emerge, designed specifically to counter the new defense. The manufacturing capabilities built into each ship allowed for complete weapon systems to be created and deployed within minutes. Admiral Tae-hyun monitored the battle from his command platform, watching as his forces demonstrated the core principle of human warfare: evolution through conflict. The devourers learned by observing and copying, he explained to the alien observers who were watching the battle feeds in stunned silence. We learn by doing and improving. They adapt to what we've already done. We adapt to what they're about to do. The tide of battle shifted dramatically when the human forces revealed their most unsettling capability. When Captain Minho's ship took critical damage from a concentrated devourer attack, he didn't order his crew to abandon ship. Instead, he set course directly for the largest enemy cluster. All units observe and record, Minho transmitted to the fleet as his ship's AI calculated the optimal impact trajectory. Ramming attack pattern Delta 7. Use my sacrifice to maximum advantage. The damaged ship struck the center of the Devourer formation at nearly the speed of light. The explosion scattered exotic matter across a sphere of space several thousand kilometers wide. But this wasn't just destruction. It was data collection. Every human ship in the battle zone analyzed the explosion in real time, studying how the Devourer hulls reacted to the exotic matter. Within minutes, they had developed new weapons based on Minho's final contribution to the battle. The Devourers found themselves facing an enemy that grew stronger from every loss, learned from every mistake, and treated death as just another form of research. But the true horror became apparent when the second wave of human ships arrived. These new vessels were not identical to the first wave. They had been built based on battle data transmitted from the fighting ships. Every weakness the Devourers had exploited was now armored against. Every successful enemy tactic was now countered before it could be deployed. Engineer So Young, coordinating the manufacturing platforms, explained the process to the horrified alien observers. We don't mourn our losses. We learn from them. Every destroyed ship teaches us how to build better ones. The Devourers, for the first time in their existence, began to retreat. Their adaptation protocols couldn't keep up with an enemy that evolved faster than they could learn. Worse, they were losing units not just to destruction, but to conversion. Former Devourers now fought alongside the humans. Their stolen knowledge turned against their original fleet. As the mechanical swarm pulled back from their first defeat, Admiral Tae-hyun received a priority transmission from his industrial platforms. Sir, Jiho reported, we've analyzed the Devourer technology from our converted units. We can now build our own versions, but better. On the tactical display, new ship designs began to appear. Human-built Devourers, improved with humanity's manufacturing techniques and AI coordination. They were faster, smarter, and completely loyal to their human creators. The galaxy watched in growing terror as humanity demonstrated that they didn't just defeat their enemies. They made them better, then made them serve. The real war was just beginning. The Devourers had never experienced defeat before, but they were learning machines. After their first battle with humanity, they retreated to the edge of the galaxy and began to evolve. They studied every second of the encounter, analyzed every human tactic, and prepared new countermeasures. They rebuilt themselves to be faster, stronger, and smarter. They developed quantum firewalls to prevent human nanobots from converting their systems. They created new weapons specifically designed to destroy the human AI networks. Most importantly, they learned to sacrifice their own units to prevent capture and conversion. When they returned to battle 3 days later, they brought 10 times their original numbers. The mechanical swarm had consumed entire solar systems to fuel their reproduction, creating a dark tide of destruction that stretched across light years of space. Admiral Taehyun watched the approaching enemy fleet from his command platform. The displays showed over 500,000 Devourer units, each one upgraded with new defenses based on their previous encounter with humanity. "They've learned well," he admitted to his staff. "This will be more difficult." The human response fleet had grown too. The 12 industrial platforms had been working continuously, producing new vessels and upgrading existing ones. Humanity now fielded nearly 100,000 ships, each one more advanced than the vessels that had fought in the first battle. But as the two fleets prepared to clash, Taehyun made an announcement that chilled the blood of every alien observer. "Phase 1 reconnaissance has been completed," he said calmly. "Begin Phase 2 deployment." The 12 original seed ships, now massive industrial complexes floating in space, began their final transformation. Instead of producing more combat vessels, they started building something entirely different. Gates. Massive ring structures that hummed with exotic energy began taking shape around each platform. The construction was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Matter being assembled at the quantum level, space itself being twisted into new configurations. "What are those?" Admiral Craxton demanded from his observation post. Dayun answered with professional calm. "Dimensional gateways. We're bringing in the main fleet." The alien commanders stared at her in shock. "Main fleet? You said the 12 ships were your entire navy." "No," Taehyun corrected gently. "I said they were our current deployment. There's a significant difference." The gates activated. What came through defied every understanding of physics and engineering that galactic science possessed. Ships that were not just large but impossibly vast emerged from dimensional rifts. The smallest vessel was the size of a small moon. The largest could have held entire solar systems within their hulls. But these weren't crude giants built for intimidation. They moved with the grace of living creatures, their hulls flowing and shifting as they emerged into normal space. Each one was a masterpiece of engineering that made the greatest achievements of galactic civilization look like children's toys. The flagship alone was larger than most space stations. As it passed through the gate, weather systems could be seen swirling across its hull. Cities of light sparkled along its surface. Forests of crystalline structures grew from its sides like living things. From this impossible vessel, Fleet Admiral Bora transmitted to the galactic observers. Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to commanding forces that could reshape reality itself. "This is Admiral Bora of the Human Expeditionary Force," she announced. "We apologize for the deception, but our diplomatic protocols require threat assessment before revealing our full capabilities." The alien commanders could barely speak. General Thax's metallic voice cracked as he asked, "How many ships do you have, currently?" "About 12 million in this dimensional layer," Bora replied casually, "but we can summon more if needed." Admiral Craxton, whose own dreadnoughts had once seemed mighty, stared at the human fleet in complete despair. "You could have destroyed us all. Our entire civilization, why would we want to do that?" Taehyun asked, genuinely puzzled. "Destruction is wasteful. We prefer cooperation and mutual benefit." The battle against the Devourers became less a war than an industrial operation. The human main fleet didn't engage in conventional combat. Instead, they treated the mechanical swarm as a manufacturing problem to be solved. Ships the size of worlds positioned themselves around the Devourer fleet. They deployed clouds of machines that made the nanobots from the first battle look primitive. These new devices didn't just convert enemy units, they improved them beyond recognition. Engineer So Young explained the process to the horrified galactic observers. "We don't destroy our enemies. We make them better, then make them ours." The Devourers found themselves being systematically harvested, studied, and reconstructed. Their most advanced units were captured and upgraded with human technology. Their quantum processors were enhanced with AI systems that operated on principles the mechanical minds couldn't comprehend. Within hours, Half the Devourer fleet was fighting under human control. But these weren't the same machines that had terrorized the galaxy. They had been transformed into something far more sophisticated, incorporating technologies that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The remaining Devourers tried desperately to adapt, but they were facing an enemy that operated on a completely different level of existence. Human technology wasn't just more advanced, it was more fundamental, built on understandings of reality that the mechanical minds couldn't grasp. When the last unconverted Devourer fell, Admiral Bora turned her attention to the galactic representatives who had been watching in stunned silence. "The immediate threat has been neutralized," she reported. "We will now begin cleanup operations in the affected systems. Full restoration should be completed within 30 standard days." "Restoration?" the crystalline representative asked weakly. "The planets that were consumed will be rebuilt," So Young explained matter-of-factly. "We have detailed quantum scans of their original states. Our manufacturing capabilities can restore them exactly as they were." As if to demonstrate, one of the massive human vessels moved toward the dead system where the planet Keth 7 had been destroyed. The ship opened like a flower, revealing construction systems that worked on a scale beyond galactic comprehension. Matter began to coalesce, atmosphere formed, and within hours a new world hung in space, identical to the one that had been devoured. Admiral Craxton could barely whisper his question. "How long have you been this powerful?" Taehyun considered the question carefully. "Our current technological level was achieved approximately 300 years ago. We've been refining it since then." 300 years, the Vorthak Admiral repeated numbly. "You've been able to conquer the entire galaxy for 3 centuries, and you chose to trade with us instead." "Conquest creates enemies," Dayun explained. "Trade creates partners. We find partners more useful than subjects." As the human fleet began to fold space around itself, preparing to return to whatever dimension they had emerged from, Bora made one final statement. "The 12 vessels you observed at Nexus Prime will remain as our diplomatic fleet. They represent our commitment to peaceful coexistence. We trust that future interactions will continue in the same spirit." The massive ships began to disappear through their dimensional gates. Within an hour, only the original 12 vessels remained. Small, innocent-looking ships that had somehow fooled the entire galaxy into thinking humanity was weak. Admiral Taehyun's final transmission was broadcast to every world in galactic space. "Humanity thanks you for your patience during this emergency response. We look forward to resuming normal diplomatic relations." As the human fleet vanished back into the darkness between dimensions, the galactic leaders sat in stunned silence. They had spent months mocking the tiny human fleet, never realizing they were looking at the most advanced civilization in the known universe. The question that haunted every alien mind was simple, but terrifying. If humanity could hide 12 million warships behind 12 scout ships, what else were they hiding? The galaxy would never be the same. Every species now knew they shared space with beings who could reshape reality itself, but who chose instead to trade and negotiate. The humans had shown both ultimate power and ultimate restraint. It was unclear which was more frightening,